Good morning, scholars. Today I'd like to talk about the Passover. We just finished studying the book of Luke. We know that when Jesus died on the cross, the Passover was going on during that time, and people were in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. The first Passover had happened very long before that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And I want to go back to the first Passover, understand what it is and why they continued to celebrate it every year afterwards. And people still in the Jewish community celebrate it today. So we need to go all the way back to when the Hebrew people, which were later called Israelites, were in Egypt under Pharaoh's rule, and the Israelites were actually slaves who Pharaoh would not let go. Now, during this time that the Israelites were in Egypt, before they were able to leave, God actually allowed plagues for the Egyptian people who were holding the Israelites captive to experience. If you remember, I believe that there was water into blood, frogs, lice or gnats, biting flies, disease of their animals or death of their animals, boils, hail, locusts and grasshoppers, and darkness. And all of these things happened because Pharaoh and his people were treating God's chosen people with cruelty. So now we've had 9 plagues happen, and we're on the 10th one. So I'm going to read for you Exodus 12, 1 through 14, and then verses 21 through 39. You can follow along in your Bible if you want to. Now the Lord gave the following instructions to Moses and Aaron while they were still in the land of Egypt. From now on, this month will be the first month of the year for you. Announce to the whole community that on the 10th day of this month, each family must choose a lamb or a young goat for a sacrifice. If a family is too small to eat an entire lamb, let them share the lamb with another family in the neighborhood. Whether or not they share in this way depends on the size of each family and how much they can eat. This animal must be a 1-year-old male, either a sheep or a goat with no physical defects. And that means, no problems, that the animal must be perfect. They couldn't have any kind of broken bone or be born with a missing limb, or the markings couldn't be off. It was considered a perfect animal. Take special care of these lambs until the evening of the 14th day of this first month. Then each family in the community must slaughter its lamb. They are to take some of the lamb's blood and smear it on the top and sides of the doorframe of the house where the lamb will be eaten. That evening, everyone must roast the lamb with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Now, I want to talk about bread made without yeast. The easiest explanation for you to understand would be pita bread or a pita pocket. You understand that it's flat, and you can stuff it. But the reason that it's flat is because it isn't made with yeast, whereas when we eat a regular sandwich and we slice from a loaf of bread, the bread has risen, and it takes a while to rise, but it rises because it's made with yeast. The meat must never be eaten raw or boiled. Roast it all, including the head, legs, and internal organs. Do not leave any of it until the next day. Whatever is not eaten that night must be burned before morning. Wear your traveling clothes as you eat this meal, as though prepared for a long journey. Wear your sandals and carry your walking sticks in your hands. Eat the food quickly, for this is the Lord's Passover. On that night, I will pass through the land of Egypt and kill all the firstborn sons and firstborn male animals in the land of Egypt. I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt, for I am the Lord. The blood you have smeared on your doorposts will serve as a sign. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. This plague of death will not touch you when I strike the land of Egypt. You must remember this day forever. Each year you will celebrate it as a special festival to the Lord. Now I'm going to move on. Remember that the blood was supposed to be placed on doorposts, on the sides, and then over top. And that was a signal to God. The Israelites were doing that, and he would send the death angel, but the death angel would pass over these families that had followed the instructions. So let's see what happens. Starting with verse 21, then Moses called for the leaders of Israel and said, tell each of your families to slaughter the lamb they have set apart for the Passover. Drain each lamb's blood into a basin. Then take a cluster of hyssop branches and dip it into the lamb's blood. Strike the hyssop against the top and sides of the door frame, staining it with the blood. And remember, no one is allowed to leave the house until morning, for the Lord will pass through the land and strike down the Egyptians. But when he sees the blood on top and on the sides of the door frame, the Lord will pass over your home. He will not permit the destroyer to enter and strike down your firstborn. Remember, these instructions are permanent and must be observed by you and your descendants forever. When you arrive in the land the Lord has promised to give you, you will continue to celebrate this festival. Then your children will ask, what does all this mean? What is this ceremony about? And you will reply, it is the celebration of the Lord's Passover. For he passed over the homes of the Israelites in Egypt. And though he killed the Egyptians, he spared our families and did not destroy us. Then all the people bowed their heads and worshiped. So the people of Israel did just as the Lord had commanded through Moses and Aaron. And at midnight, the Lord killed all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn son of the captive in the dungeon. Even the firstborn of their livestock were killed. Pharaoh and his officials and all the people of Egypt woke up during the night, and loud wailing was heard throughout the land of Egypt. There was not a single house where someone had not died. The Israelites took with them their bread dough made without yeast. They wrapped their kneading bowls in their spare clothing and carried them on their shoulders. And the people of Israel did as Moses had instructed and asked the Egyptians for clothing and articles of silver and gold. The Lord caused the Egyptians to look favorably on the Israelites, and they gave the Israelites whatever they asked for. So, like a victorious army, they plundered the Egyptians. That night, the people of Israel left. There were about 600,000 men, plus all the women and children, and they were all traveling on foot. Many people who were not Israelites went with them, along with the many flocks and herds. Whenever they stopped to eat, they baked bread made from the dough without yeast they had brought from Egypt. It was made without yeast because the people were rushed out of Egypt and had no time to wait for the bread to rise. Now, you should be able to go on and now do your workbook page in your Bible workbook. We tore these pages out before we left, and they should be in the Bible section of your binder. For you, I believe it is workbook page 57. Again, you can refer to Exodus 12, 1 through 14, and Exodus 12, 21 through 39. We will talk about this workbook page, and we will talk about a memory selection next week when we have our first Zoom meeting. Thanks. Bye.